All right, so I'm gonna be the first to admit that the U.S. Coast Guard really doesn't get enough credit for the hard work they do. And since I have something I can do about that, I'm going to. So today we are going to be talking about the U.S. Coast Guard Cutter Kimball and some of the drug interdiction operations that they've done over the past year. So the U.S. Coast Guard Cutter Kimball WMSL 756 is a Legend-class national security cutter homeported in Honolulu, Hawaii. They conducted significant drug interdiction operations in the Eastern Pacific of this past year during 2025. These operations, spanning from February until April of 2025, resulted in the seizure of approximately 18,898 pounds of Colombian Bam Bam. We'll just call it that. With an estimated street value of over $214.3 million, and also the detention of 18 suspected smugglers. So while they were in the Eastern Pacific Ocean off the coasts of Mexico, Central America, and South America, they seized approximately 9.5 tons of this stuff. They also sank at least one drug smuggling vessel because it was a hazard to navigation to the area. Now, these operations were part of a broader multi-agency effort to combat transnational criminal organizations and also disrupt maritime drug smuggling routes, particularly those that are fueling the production and trafficking of these illicit substances and fentanyl precursors. Because as you guys all probably know, fentanyl's been a significant problem for the United States because, well, China's been selling it to the cartels, and then the cartels are using it to cut all kinds of other illicit substances, and then they go over the border. Now, Kimball's efforts aligned with the U.S. Coast Guard's mission as the lead federal agency for maritime drug interdiction, conducted under the authority of the 11th Coast Guard District in Alameda, California. Now, these operations intensified following executive orders in 2025, which declared a national emergency and called for increased efforts to counter drug trafficking and to disrupt cartel activities. Now, these operations were characterized by a layered approach integrating aerial surveillance, tactical law enforcement boardings, and coordination with interagency and international partners. Now, the Eastern Pacific Ocean is a critical corridor for drug trafficking, with the cartels using maritime routes to transport cocaine from South America, primarily from Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia, to Central America, Mexico, and ultimately the United States, and also Europe. Now, the Kimball patrolled international waters off the coast of Mexico, Guatemala, Costa Rica, and other Central and South American nations during this deployment. Multi-agency coordination was also a major part of it because they coordinate with multiple U.S. agencies, including the Department of Defense, Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. Navy, Customs and Border Protection, the FBI, the DEA, and ICE. They also worked with international partners such as the Guatemalan Drug Enforcement Agency, who also played a critical role in the transfer of custody and the prosecutions. Now, the Kimball had an embarked MH-65 Dolphin helicopter, but they also have other Coast Guard / Navy assets that they can use to help identify suspected vessels and monitor the area and surveil the area. Once it was determined that they found a vessel that was suspected of trafficking, they would put together boarding teams, including members from the Kimball's crew, Tactical Law Enforcement, Team South, and Maritime Safety and Security, Team Los Angeles, Long Beach, and they conducted at-sea boardings to inspect vessels and seize contraband. Now, all the seized drugs were secured aboard the Kimball. The smugglers were detained, and the vessels posing navigational hazards were sunk. Now, like I said before, they conducted 6 separate interdictions, resulting in the cumulative seizure of 18,898 pounds of Colombian Bam Bam. However, the specific dates and locations for most of these things are not detailed because they're not going to give away exactly where they were and when they were located in a specific place for operational security. Now, on or about April 17th of 2025, a notable interdiction took place, marking the Kimball's 5th successful operation of the patrol, in which they recorded a good bit of footage from. A small boat crew from the Kimball, supported by aerial surveillance, intercepted a suspected smuggling vessel in the Eastern Pacific. This operation involved a multi-phase approach as well, including surveillance flights, vessel interdiction, and then eventually drug seizure. The vessel was later sunk as a hazard to navigation after the contraband and the personnel were secured on board the Kimball. Another documented event occurred on or around March 23rd of 2025, when the Kimball's crew, using a 35-foot long-range Interceptor 2 cutter boat, oversaw the sinking of a suspected drug smuggling vessel after seizing its contraband and detaining its personnel. Now, on April 24th, 2025, the Kimball offloaded the 18,898 pounds of illicit substance in San Diego, California, at a press conference which was attended by Captain Robert Kinsey, who's the Kimball's commanding officer at the time. Now, all of the illicit substances were stacked in these giant bales that almost look like hay bales because they're so big, and they're stacked on the cutter's flight deck, and they were transferred to federal authorities for further processing. The offload was the result of 6 interdictions conducted by the Kimball, with additional contributions from the Coast Guard Cutter Forward. Now, like I said, the Kimball detained 18 suspected smugglers across the 6 interdictions, after which on March 11th of this year, 12 of those individuals were transferred to the Coast Guard Investigative Service and the Guatemalan Drug Enforcement Agency in Puerto Quetzal, Guatemala, for further investigation and prosecution. Now, 18,898 pounds of this stuff is no small number, and having it seized by the Coast Guard definitely represents a significant disruption to cartel operations in the region, ultimately reducing the amount of money that they're able to draw in to continue their operations, especially because of the fact that they heavily rely on drug trafficking to fund other illicit activities, including the production of fentanyl and also human trafficking. By targeting these maritime routes, the Kimball's operations disrupted the flow of illicit substances and all these other precursors, which are often smuggled via the same corridors. The Coast Guard emphasized that these efforts aim to prevent drugs from reaching U.S. shores and fueling the ongoing overdose crisis and drug epidemic that this country is facing, especially due to the porous nature that the border has exhibited over the past period of time. Now, as far as the detention of the 18 smugglers and their transfer to U.S. and international authorities, this helps support criminal prosecutions, which are critical to dismantling cartel networks. The U.S. Coast Guard's collaboration with U.S. attorneys' offices ensure that legal action follows interdictions. Now, Captain Robert Kinsey, who, like I said, was at the time the captain of the Coast Guard Cutter Kimball, highlighted the operation's success as a testament to the crew's professionalism and the Coast Guard's role in protecting American citizens. The public offload event in San Diego also served as a public relations event that shows and demonstrates the tangible results of these efforts to the public and policymakers. Now, the Kimball's 2025 drug interdiction operations occurred within a pretty complex geopolitical and operational environment, which was shaped by numerous factors, including the escalating drug war. The U.S. government, under renewed War on Drugs initiative, intensified maritime interdiction efforts in 2025, especially since President Trump was elected. There's a lot of executive orders that were issued in early 2025 calling for increased Coast Guard operations to target drug smugglers and disrupt cartel activities. This is all part of the initiative to secure the border and also secure maritime routes that circumvent the border that cartels and other foreign terrorist organizations are using to traffic either people or illicit substances. Additionally, the Eastern Pacific has seen a surge in drug trafficking with cartels using advanced methods like narco submarines, high-speed vessels, and other things to evade detection. Fortunately, the Kimball's advanced sensors and endurance were critical to countering these tactics and were successful in doing so. These transnational criminal organizations, including the Latin American cartels, are responsible for the large bulk of illicit substance production and trafficking into the United States. The Coast Guard has mentioned on numerous occasions that these organizations also facilitate the trafficking of people as well. Now, the Eastern Pacific's vast expanse of harsh open ocean conditions require cutters like the Kimball, which are designed for long-range, high-endurance missions that smaller vessels may not be able to handle. The vessel's 418 feet in length and has a 28-knot speed, as well as a 12,000 nautical mile range, which enabled sustained operations far from their home port. Another thing to consider is the fact that boarding operations in international waters is inherently risky because it requires highly trained crews to navigate unpredictable situations, including potential resistance from the smugglers. Like, what if they have machine guns on board and they just start firing at you as soon as you pull up? Because as you've seen in some of these videos, like, the guys were armed, they had like a pistol pulled. But what if the drug smugglers had fully automatic weapons or mounted machine guns? You could have a real problem. Fortunately, the Kimball's tactical law enforcement teams demonstrated expertise in conducting these high-stakes boardings, including the logistical challenges that they managed to navigate, like managing large quantities of seized drugs and detaining smugglers that they have to keep on the cutter while they continue the rest of their deployment. Now, the Kimball has a very successful history of drug interdictions. In 2022, it offloaded over 11,300 pounds of Colombian Bam Bam, as well as 4,000 pounds of Mary Jane, which was worth $223 million in San Diego, which continued to demonstrate its established role in counter-narcotics operations. Now, despite the Kimball's success, global cocaine production and trafficking continue to rise, with 2025 described as a peak period for the drug trade. The $214.3 million seizure, while significant, represents a fraction of the estimated multi-billion-dollar market. The intensification of counter-narcotics operations in 2025, which has been driven by executive orders and among other things, and also proposals for military action against cartels, has sparked debates about the efficacy of the war on drugs. A lot of critics out there arguing that interdictions alone can't address the root causes like demand and socioeconomic factors in source countries. That being said, the U.S. Coast Guard's actions and efforts are making an impact, and what they are doing does matter, because that $214 million that they seized worth of drugs isn't going to be in the United States in the open market now, which means that less people will get their hands on it. And that can impact tens of thousands of people across the country. Now, I think one of the biggest key points of this is that these operations demonstrated the Kimball's advanced capabilities, the crew's expertise, and the importance of interagency and international collaboration in combating transnational criminal organizations. And I want people to understand that they are out there fighting the good fight, because that's what they're doing. Trying to keep the United States safer. They're trying to do everything they can to reduce the amount of drugs that are on the streets. And while these efforts dealt a significant blow to cartels and supported national security objectives, they also highlight the ongoing challenges of addressing a global drug trade that continues to grow in scale and complexity. The Kimball's operations, led by Captain Robert Kinsey and supported by a dedicated crew, serve as a testament to the Coast Guard's commitment to protecting the U.S. shores and promoting a rules-based maritime order. So shout out to the Coast Guard, because you guys are busting your ass out there and you're doing a good job. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. If you see a Coast Guard member out there, thank them for their service too, because those guys are out there working just as hard as everyone else in the Department of Defense. In any case, let me know what you thought about this video in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.